So what did you want to be when you grew up?
Actually, I don't know if I ever had any major objective. I had a tendency to want to be on stage, so to speak, and that's on the broad stage. I wanted to be noticed, I wanted to be recognized, and I think I found, as I mentioned, that first little episode in the theater, I got that big charge out of making the whole theater laugh on a simple little thing. So I was if I want to be anything when I grew up, I want to be doing in the public. I think as I grew older, I thought public relations was what I wanted to be in, not really knowing what the field was all about. But I I didn't even, I wasn't directed in any way. That in fact, my schooling was sort of haphazard too, in that if I wanted to be a writer, I should have taken an English course. But that seemed like that seemed like what everybody, take that English course. And instead I took a science course in high school. And partly that was because my best friend took a science course. And he took German, so I took German. My grandmother was German. That was great. My father said, take Spanish. It's the language of trade or something. But so I'd hear a lot of advice, but I didn't always take it. So it was self-directed. And but as an actual goal, I don't know that I had anything other than that fact that I wanted to be a writer, a singer, poet. I was writing poetry, obviously, then too, so I didn't aspire to be a great poet, but that was a great hobby, and it was attention-getting. And I just liked an exhibitionist in a sense. If I see a chance to jump into something and make a splash, I do. So that was my only goals. And I was growing up, I got into acting in high school, and liked that. And I sang with all the way. In high school, my friend and I, he had an uncle who had a band, and we sang some of his songs that he did, and got into a pickup quartet at that time, and later I got into barbershop quartet singing too. But at that time I was anything like that. I didn't have any interest in mechanics in any way. He could take his car apart, and the first car he had, and line up the pieces along the driveway so he can get them back in the same order that he took them out. And I never took apart watches or anything like that, like kids did. I was not that way. So I guess it was the direction I was going, but it wasn't specific. It was just put myself out there in some way. So.
Okay. Now starting to go into the adolescent shift. And some of these might be redundant, so hopefully, but it's okay that we maybe can get a different angle.
That's covered that adolescent, same goals.
Same goals.
They just moved that way.
Okay, so we'll go on to 25. So, so as an adolescent, when you went into that time period, if I were to ask you, who are you, what would you have said?
Well, something comes to mind that I've heard later. I'm sure I wouldn't have said it then, but I probably in describing myself, I could have said, well, I'm a Catholic, because at the time, before I really knew what religion was all about, I was just Catholicized, and I thought we were the dominant religion in the world, from that narrow viewpoint. But I would have much said I'm a Catholic at that time. And a writer. And a budding athlete. I was very athletic, and I'd try anything you could do. You know, I did an awful lot of a variety of things on bicycles, on ice skates, I think I mentioned that I went ice skating all over the east side one time when they had an ice storm, and so that's what I was. I was just a seeker of wisdom.
So I know you mentioned some of your friends, but when you were an adolescent, what type of friends did you kind of hang out with?
There was a variety. There was a transition there from grade school to high school. That many that I knew in grade school went to private schools when they got to high school. Several, because I lived in a very high level area in Milwaukee near the lake, and all of those kids that I knew was in grade school, they'd go to different schools, and I went to Riverside High School, which is now called Riverside University Hospital. Riverside University High School. I don't know where they got that, but they're preparatory for, and this is the oldest high school in the city. It was originally called East Side, or originally called Riverside. None of they had South and North and so forth, and then they called it East Side, but everybody still remembered it as a Riverside, and they still use it. But I kept in touch with some of them, but they drifted, and I found one friend in 5th grade that has remained my one true friend all my life. I don't have another that I could say was anywhere near that close. We had, in high school, there were 4 of us that met before we were seniors. One was from another school, but they married people that we knew, and in the early 1950s, we celebrated 4 50th wedding anniversaries. All 4 of them, all 4 couples stayed together. And it was a notable event for us. We all made it. But a couple of them were wartime marriages, But that friend, and and I guess I should include John Jones for a time, through high school anyway. John Jones was in our neighborhood too, and John and I, in our freshman year, I was the top student in the class and he was second. And in that year, but actually starting in sophomore, I had met my wife and went steady and so forth, and that took that goal away, and John ended up being valedictorian when we graduated senior, and I was a B+ only, But he went on to work for a senator, as a matter of fact, and changed his name to John Burnett, didn't like John Jones. And I lost track of him. But Fritz Myers was my lifelong friend, and if we did anything, it would be friends of his or with his brother, or a number of friends from the track team and things like that. We, often have nothing real close, just guys to go out with. Went out and played pool when we were old enough to get in the pool parlor, and it was, just one close friend is all I have that I hang on to. And I guess if we have to be honest with all these things. My closest friends, other than Fritz, have been women. I do get along with them. I think they like me because I compliment them or I write a poem about them. I found out that's a great ploy to use poetry, but I found out that they're honest with me, and I'm honest with them, and especially when they recognize that I'm not predatory or I've had occasions in an office, for example, where I would do what now you cannot do. You can't put your hand on your shoulder and something you don't touch, And I would had one or two occasions that I know that I do that, and I'd see the girl shy away from her, and so I stayed away from her. I didn't want to indicate that I was. And a couple of months would go by, and she'd come up to me and say, "Is there something wrong with me? Don't you like me, or something like that? You're having so much fun with everyone else, but you don't." I said, "Well, I didn't think you like you." She said, "Well, I didn't know you then." And so I stayed within bounds, but I have to say honestly, not according to what happened when the sex stuff got into the office, when you can't even tell a joke, and the girls would complain, "We want to hear the jokes," but you don't know who to tell it to that won't complain. So you see, it became real stiff after a while. But in an advertising agency where I did really more camaraderie in the agency than when I was directing, I'm getting ahead of myself, but there's a pretty good understanding, and you know where you stand, and you just don't overdo it. I didn't believe things I heard when they first started writing about sex in the office and so forth, sexual harassment. I didn't believe that anybody would tell a girl, "Well, either go to bed with me or we won't get ahead in this business." So I thought, I can't believe anybody would be that desperate or that stupid. But it's true. I mean, I just didn't believe it, especially not the people I knew. And a thing that bothered me quite a bit in the working area was when I would go to movies, advertising agencies being the movie, and these women would use the open language that the kids and came up with. I said, that doesn't happen in the agency. They don't talk like that in the agency. They may have some intimate friends or at home or something like that, but I never heard it. I never heard the F word in our agency in any way. And I didn't like movies depicting that kind of thing, And the agency there were looser, obviously, than some places, but that really bothered me because I didn't believe they were depicting it as was. Maybe not. Maybe I was wrong. Maybe I just was in a good agency. I just been having an email with a woman in Oregon who was in our Oregon branch of our agency, and who said she worked for 5 alcoholic managers. And she says, "Why didn't that happen up in Seattle? Was it the 3 guys that?" It was a very solid agency. That they were the longest agency in business in Seattle, and I finally joined them. But there were 3 real great guys, and they would have drinks, but never I saw any of them overdo it, and very polite, and they even issued a little order about, one time they put out a little message that when the mini skirts came out, the mini skirt had to be no more than 3 inches above the knee. And I wrote a little, this is one of my, I wrote a counter thing. because we had a girl named Ida Matsudaira, Ida, and she was only about 5 feet tall.
Huh.
And I said, that's, I wrote my other thing, in analyzing this thing, that's going to be just under her chin, the 3 inches above her knee. I just, and but that, but it was a good agency to work for, all the way. But I'll get more of that, I guess, a little bit later. You mentioned earlier about what did I want to be and so forth, and I touched on it that I took the science course and I learned something. I wasn't really good in chemistry. I remember that was tough, but it wasn't my bag. And when I got to college, I began to now I wanted to write, and the advice I got was, you'll starve. Writers just don't make any money. A few make a pile of it, but very few. The average writer is, newspaper people don't make any money, and they're writing their heads off, And so they said, take a good business course, because my aunt and uncle had a business, and they wanted me in it anyway. I worked for them I was doing their accounting. So I took a business course, and I took Biz Ad, and for 2.5 years was doing fine. But I did have advertising as a minor, and or advertising and marketing. But then along came the war, and so now jump ahead a little bit, because I think we might want to cover something there, but just to settle this idea of what I wanted to be, I came back from 3 years in the Army and went back to school, and they gave me a 3-day aptitude exam, real comprehensive. And I told him why I wanted to. I said, because I want to write, and I think I'm not wasting my time in accounting. And my family had in mind that I would be a tax lawyer or something like that, because I was so great at arguing. And they thought that would have been a lucrative place to go. We got the results, and the fella, I remember he just sat back and he said, I'm supposed to advise you. And he said, I guess what I should advise you to, he said, from what I see here, you could be successful at anything you tried, except mechanical. You're in the pit with mechanics. Maybe I was intentionally, I don't know, but it was obviously not my like or dis. And because I was very high in literary, very high in computative ability, high in music, and he said, take your pick. And he said, as long as you got 2.5 years in, why waste it? Start over. Stay with accounting. And he said, you only have 1.5 years to go. And I already had one baby then. So I figure that's the smart thing to do, is stay with it, get a job, I'll find my way, So that was a sort of a place where I could have changed my goal some. I never did, but it was in the back of my mind all the time. But as the kids came along, I just had to have a job, so I kept with what I was doing. But so actually, I made my own decisions. I heard people and I listened to them and I thought about it, and in this particular case, in college, coming back from the war, I listened and it sounded logical, and I knew I was up against it. I had to, make money, and soon, so I stayed with it. I didn't have time or the money. My scholarship wouldn't have gone much beyond that anyway. So.
So we kind of touched on 27.
Yeah.
So during adolescence, obviously, we touched on a little bit about history, but do you remember anything specific around the teenage years that kind of came up for you?
Big decisions. 15 cents is a big decision. It was, because going to high school, every day I'd walk past my grandmother's house where my brother lived, and every day I'd go there and she'd give me 15 cents for lunch money. That was in the Depression years, and I'd save the 15 cents, wouldn't eat lunch, and then after school I would take my girlfriend over and we'd buy Butter Crunch cones at the Walgreens pharmacy. And that was a good decision, I thought. And another time, as an adolescent, I had 2 lucky breaks. I was competing in what they call a highlight contest. It's the paddle ball, the rubber paddle. And the theater had a bicycle for first prize, and I certainly wanted a bicycle. And so I was practicing, and I was doing all kinds of tricks with it, like you're supposed to do it. But I got bad something, the flu, or I forget what it was, and my mother went to work, so I had to stay with my grandmother. I was out of school, and Saturday came along in this contest, and I was in bed, and they weren't going to let me go. And I found my clothes, and I climbed out a window of the bedroom, and I went over, and I won the bicycle.
Wow.
And that cured my cold in a hurry, or whatever I had, but it was, again, I make my own decisions on things like that. I'm not going to, I've made my decision right now. Anyway, that was, they just sit around long enough. I can remember all kinds of things like that, but I buried a nickel under a lamppost way up someplace, and several years later I went looking for it. I couldn't find it. I thought it'd be fun to dig something up like that, but
so I think we're moving now into more of your adult life, and so this question is, I guess, could go back to where you consider the beginning of your adulthood and all the way through currently. So kind of who are the most important people in your life?
Oh, who are the most important people? Well, right now, I would have to say my wife and my children are most important. My mother was obviously the most important growing up. And my aunt was extremely important in that she constantly gave me direction, helped me with money from time to time in college, but always expected that I would go to work for her company. My brother already was. He was the chemical engineer and working in, they had a big sand producing business, and they had pits all over the state, and I was going to be the accountant. He was the admin. He was out salesman, so to speak, or a troubleshooter for companies. And so she was a force behind everything. Her father died when he was 40-something, and my grandmother, her mother, raised the 3 children. She raised them well. The oldest was my aunt, and she took over as matriarch and ran the show. Her husband was a former reporter and PR man and not a businessman, but she took care of him. And I saw that manipulation, and she manipulated my father, who was the baby of the family. She made herself a life, but a tough one. I remember seeing her. They took the streetcar to the office before they had a car, and she told me time and time again, the best thing you can do is maintain a good credit rating. She said, you'll never know when you can leave it. She made that work, where she could ask for anything from Marine National Bank, because they all knew her and she was good for her word. First thing I did when I got out was ruin my credit rating. I've known that all these years, because I said, that's one thing she pounded into me, and I just wasn't going to take that. I didn't purposely ruin it, but I just was, silly. Well, too many kids. But she was was a key, and she was, I thought, he came between my father and my mother by babying him and taking him in, and he was he had actually, he was quite rich when he was 27. He sales manager for a chain belt company, a big company, and founded his own company at that time. And in a short time, he, as they told me, that his partner was crooked and he wouldn't have it, so he sold out to his partner for $250,000, and then drank and gambled all the way in the next few years, up until 1929, when whatever else was left went. And 1929, I was 7 years old, so I never saw any of those lush years, but he drank from then on. He was a very kind, polite drunk, and generous when he'd come home and give us each a quarter or something like that, Never saw him fight with my wife or my mother. And but he was the baby, and I guess they sort of protected him. And my mother was a wonderful person, but she was docile and weak, and she wasn't a power like my aunt was. And I think they stayed married because of my aunt. I think she said, you will not, divorce. The kids need you. I'm almost certain that, because they should have. And mother, I remember telling her, I had a couple of cigar boxes full of canceled checks from the Chinese gambling dens in Milwaukee that she was going to use it, but she never could afford to get a divorce, I guess, or was turned away from it. So
important people in your life. How about describe your love relationships as a young adult?
Oh, well, that tier again was very narrow. I met, it was sort of a love-hate, or hate-love, I guess, starting that related, because she sat behind me as freshman, and I was into my work at that time, studying and so forth. I wasn't interested in her, but she was behind me, and the way we met, she was behind me, and we were on the 4th floor above this large school, Riverside, and we were on the 4th floor, and in our next class was gym, and that was on the 1st floor on the very opposite side of the building. And whoever got in there first and got dressed and out would shoot basketballs for 10 minutes and so forth. So we always wanted to get down there as fast as we could. So in class, I would manage to be, John Jones and I, both of us, take off her shoes and take off her socks, stuck them in her pocket, put her shoes back on. I was able to get my undershirt off. You know how you could do that, was a little later, and get it out finally over my neck. And she was something, I was the most disgusting thing she ever saw. So then, straight enough, she dated my best friend, Fritz, whom I had been my best friend in 5th grade. So she dated him, and he must have told her I was a nice guy or something like that, you know, because it wasn't that she couldn't stand me, but at the moment she was disgusted with me And that freshman year, I wrote something in her, like people do. You know, I wrote a still cryptic message, you know, something. I've had my eye on you, or whatever that, you know. And when school opened the next year, or next September, she came up to me and said, "What do you mean by what you wrote in my, you know?" I said, "Oh, I didn't think you'd think anything about it. But I wrote this poem for you." "You did? I'm going to see it." "Oh, you know, you want to see it, you know. Yes." So, okay. So after school, I got Fritz and we went home, and I said, "Play something nice on the piano for me. I got to write a poem that I was supposed to have written last." And so he played, and as I recall, he played Claire de Lune. And I wrote this poem to her, which in it's not in that book. In the way that you expand your vocabulary and use words you never should. I called it Sempiternal Solace. And it was, "Oh, would that I had kissed her and then gone, and dream of that last kiss till dawn," or something like that. You know, one of so syrupy poem. Terrible. And but that got her. And then we started just dating, and I never went out with anyone else. She did, and a couple of times. She went out with one of the cheerleaders, a friend of mine, and because I wasn't going to be there, I had to go with my family to a wedding someplace. But I remember at the wedding, there was slot machines, and I won about $3 in a slot machine. So when the wedding was over, I went to that dance that he had taken her to. And I don't know how it worked out, but she went home with me instead of with him. Terrible thing to do, you know, terrible thing. He was okay about it, but he ribbed me some. But he takes her to the dance, and I take her home, you know. And then, but from then on, that was it. And she had a sort of boyfriend from grade school that I don't think he went to our high school, but I guess he came to a dance or something, because he came to dance one time, and he was out there dancing with her, and a couple of the guys on the track team said, "What's going on over there?" And I said, "Well, that's an old boyfriend." And he said, "We'll fix that," you know. And they just wondered, I don't know what they told him, but it wasn't a fight, but he just said, you know, something to him, to forget it. And so one time he took her to a movie, though, and I was over at her house when he came to pick her up, and hiding, that is, and I stayed with her mother until they got back home. And he never knew that I was there. But that pretty well settled it. She said I just had to see him, and so. But from that point on, we were, and the teachers and our advisor and so forth were all over her saying, "He's no good to you. He's not going to do any good. You ruin your life. You're too close. We can't, you know." I was just with her all the time. And then we had two teachers that were beautiful. One was was an English teacher, and she'd let us sit together on sit and use one book, and Miss Watson, I remember. And some liked it, and some liked the romance of it, and some weren't too sure. But our high school advisor, the one whose homeroom we were in the very beginning, Mr. Hapey, when I was in, Lorna wanted to be a nurse, and she couldn't go to college. She couldn't afford it, and she was doing, forget, Gray Ladies or something, whatever. She was doing something in the nursing area, but she was working for Bitker Gerner or somebody in someplace. And I found out that they had scholarships available at Marquette, where I was going to school. And I got the information on it. I went back to see Mr. Tapey, and I asked him if he would help to write up a resume for her and so forth. And he said, oh, great. And so he and I put it together. And I'd already been in school for a year then, and we got it set, and we submitted it without her knowledge. And one day I got the answer. I called her up. She was working. I said, I want to come pick you up. And she said, well, I don't. I said, no, you have to leave. You have to come in and register for college. She said, what? She didn't know it. I went and got her. So she went to Marquette. And she had 3 years there. But the first year was okay. The second year I'm going, and so she finished college there, and just opportunities jump at you, sometimes. It was a great time. But it was a stormy relationship. She was very headstrong, and I never always wanted to. My book of poetry, the rich one, I've lost her a dozen times, and my poet bunch it always came back. So it was a time when I was going to go see her. Nothing big. I was just going to see her, and my brother and my father said, let's go bowling. My father had been a bowler. He said he was, and never happened. And man, when my brother and my father, two guys that sort of distant, I called her. I said, okay, I'm going to bowling. So I did, and remember, I won the first round, and my brother won the second, and my father went ape on the third one, shot a 222, as I recall, and then he said, well, I just had to get myself loosened up, and and he never bowled with him again. It was but I got this big long letter. I never thought you could be like that. I can't trust you. Blah blah blah. It was up and down relationship all the way through. And a couple of times, some girl at school asked me if I wear my jacket or something like that, I didn't know that would almost hit the ceiling. She was never going to wear that jacket again, And when I was going to fall out for football, she said, then forget about me. So I thought I would be a great football player. I would have been until I broke my leg or something, but I would have been because of my youth. I knew I could elude anybody at any time, And so that was the only thing I regretted, but you get over it, and you got a good girlfriend. But it's that's about it. I say it was a love-hate. I say that way because it was always stormy. And continued that way through our life, but we managed to, muddle through them all.
like the next question kind of flows from that because you described how you met her already.
Mm-hmm.
But how long did you know each other before getting married?
Yeah,
and what was your wedding like?
5 years, because we went together for the last 3 years of high school and a year in college, and then in the second year, then I went into the Army. And before I went, I gave her an engagement ring. And I gave it to her when she was in the drugstore, having a Coke with several girls for sorority or something on the campus there at Milwaukee. And I gave it to her then, and I was set to go in a week or so anyway, but she didn't like that. And I often thought it was, why not? There was friends see that, and I thought, no, I'm trying to put on an act. I'm on stage. I'm giving her a ring, And I think that was just a difference of opinion, and I think that's why I did it, without meaning to. That's just my way. So then I went in the Army, and I was in the Army, I think basic training, 3 months. Yeah, I guess so. And then I was getting ready to go someplace, and they called me in and said, would you like to go back to college? Well, I thought they meant Marquette. I said, yay! Sure. Well, he said, your Army class, General AGCT, our Army General Classification Test, was so high that we thought we could do something, and like send you back to school, a 9-month program and get a commission. There it is. So I said, good. And then I was going to get a furlough in between where I was going, and Lorna decided she'd come out to California and meet me and spend the furlough with me. And so at that time, sometime right in that area, I said to her, I will not get married until I either get my commission or until my discharge. I can't afford to get married. I'm not through school, and I have the letter that I wrote to her. And within a week or two, I get these cryptic letters. Did your father talk to you yet? Did your father talk to you? No. What happened was, Dad said, you're not fooling me, Annie. You're going out there to get married, and you're not going to do that. You're going to get married here. I was a shotgun wedding. My own father was. And so he sent me an airplane ticket. Money for the airplane ticket, so that I could come home on my furlough and get married. And my brother made all the arrangements. And I saw a picture of my wife's going away dress as a sort of blue and purple, real beautiful dress that she was going to get married in. She was going to get married, and so that's what I was expecting. And we got married in Jesu Cathedral in Milwaukee, which is Marquette's, and married by the young priest that was her and my religion. I took religion class and then Marquette, Jesuits. But anyway, and I could not get on the train. I couldn't bump anybody. I didn't have priority, and I waited a whole day. Only had a week coming home to get back. And so I had to jump on a bus. And I took the bus. Yeah, this was the second time. Excuse me. Second time was the bus. That was different. But I jumped on a train. I got a train, and that train was so old that it had these cane back seats that you put either way depending on which way the car was going and stuff. And it stopped at every podunk place on the way home. And I literally stood up the whole first night because there was no place to sit. The second night I found one of those little metal seats there, and I'd sit between the cars, and I have to get up every time people come in and out, and I took my seat and sit down. The third night I did get a seat. And when I got home I was in a daze from sort of lack of sleep, you know. And when I got into the tub right away, and I had everywhere there was an opening in my shirt, there was this black all over it. And so I didn't even know where the wedding was going to be. I guess I did know it was going to be at Jesus Cathedral, but we finally got there, and my brother had a party for me, a bachelor party the night before, and I slept until about a half hour before the wedding. I mean, I was so dead. It's all set. They had everything ready for it. Got on my uniform and over to the church. And so I was up waiting up there, and all of a sudden here comes this angel in white. My aunt said she had to have a white gown, and so she was so beautiful. I was crying all the way. But and one of these four married couples that I've talked about, one of them was home on furlough too. He was one of the ushers. And but otherwise almost all of our friends were in the army, and, you know, some were women, but it was a great wedding. And afterwards there was the dinner and so forth, and I'm sort of off playing the piano someplace. You know, I'm in the room, still pretty much in a daze, you know, from the whole thing. Then we had a compartment that they got for us on the train, and headed back. That's right, she came with me, and we headed back out to California. And it was a great trip. And we found a place to live right near the campus. What happened, I didn't miss it, that they did assign me to, first from Pasadena. I was in Pasadena Junior College, and then they assigned me to Pomona College in Claremont. This is right in all the Scripps Howard colleges are. There's a little bunch of them there. And Lorna came out with me, of course, and immediately she got a job in the infirmary for all the model schools there, because she was a nurse. And I'd walk home from the place and pick orange and grapefruit for us for breakfast off the trees as I was going. It was like a, you know, Midwestern city boy doesn't know anything about things like that. You can't pick grapefruit off the trees. You know. It was wonderful. And I think what I would say that it was one long 9-month honeymoon, because we just enjoyed the school and enjoyed California, and went into town when we could, and just had a ball, you know, for 9 months. But then they closed up. The war was being won, and this is 1944, And they decided they didn't need the Army Specialized Training Program anymore, and they sort of closed up the program, and I never got my commission. But I might have had one if I hadn't gotten married, because after my first 3 months, there was a couple of colonel and a general or somebody called me in and asked me if I wanted to go to West Point. Sure, that sounds big to me. And so they said something, could you be ready to leave? I said, I'm going home and get married. I can't go now. I'm going to, oh, you can't get married, they said. I said, no, you can't get married. You can't go to West Point. So I said, well, I'm sorry. So there was my first chance that I lost, but all funny things like that just happen. And although I haven't, let's say, itemized these things as we go, but I have been doing this lately, that every time a door closed, or every time I stumbled, or every time there was a step backwards or something happened, a better opportunity was immediately right after it. And it's been that way all my life. I have lived a charmed life, and I honestly have said so often, why not me? Where lots of people say, oh, why me? Why me? Why did this happen to me? I always say, gee, why not me? What's happened? Why have I been so lucky? And I even consider myself lucky during the Depression. I didn't, because everybody else is, in a sense, was like that. I don't know if I told you that time that I went to camp, or went to this summer home that these people had, and they had a case of pop, and I thought, nobody ever had a case of pop. I couldn't believe that simple thing. But I was happy during my, I was not sullen or argumentative or anything, argumentative, yes, excuse me, but with logic and reason. When I told, did I mention, I don't know if I got into high school, that when I was a junior, I had set the city record in high jump. And when I fell, and during that junior year, I was in X classes because I was, capable of doing these better work. But in trigonometry, she'd assign homework and I would do half of it. Now, it's just possible that I did exactly half. That would be more like me, I think, than just, I've run out of time. I think I did just half. But I got perfect grades on all the tests, got A's on all the tests. And when the first report cards came out, I was given a grade of 75, which would put me out of you have to have a 90 or above to be in the X classes, and I said, I can't take a 75, I'm not going to. I went down to the vice principal, who was the disciplinarian, and I told him, gave him my report card, and I said, it says right here on the period, homework is not compulsory, but if a student is falling behind in something, it behooves the parents, blah, 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 blah. I said, then she can't grade me on homework and not give me credit. He said, she can do anything she wants in her class. That's her responsibility. If you can't get along with her and so forth, then you can drop the class. But I said, well, I'm not going to let her flunk me on that. He said, sorry, he couldn't help me. I don't like this, but I still don't think it was fair. So I said, well, I'll drop it then. And then he said, then it'll wipe off you won't have any, won't have that score on there. So the next spring when I fell out for track, the track coach came over, what the devil did you do in here? And what he told me, he said, you can't drop a class. You could flunk one. You could flunk it and you'd be eligible for athletics, but you can't drop one. That's the rules. So here's my senior year, I can't compete. So what happened, and I guess this is chronological because what happened is my best friend and I, who tied in every meet we had, we always tied somehow or other. He went to the relays, Waukesha relays, and my brother, simultaneous, same day, asked me if I'd high jump in his name in an intra-fraternity meet at college. Oh, that sounded like fun, so I did. Well, I won the high jump there, and the track team was running it, for them. And a few of these guys came over and said, why aren't you out for, track? Why don't you? I said, well, I'm too busy. I have drinking and all that. And they finally saw through it somehow or other, and so he was disqualified. I was disqualified anyway. But these three guys took me there. I thought it was real terrible trouble, They took me there and took me over to see the coach. Sat down, talked to him and everything. Here's Marquette. I'm Catholic. My brother went there, and anyway, he said, how would you like to go to Marquette? And I said, well, I'll say, He said, well, I can arrange for scholarship for you. He said, you're jumping in our league already. So I got my scholarship from that. So we hear this terrible thing that happened to me as a senior led to a scholarship at Marquette. So it's this kind of thing has happened to me all my life. Some people look over their shoulder to see what's going to happen. I look over and see what's the next one going to come, And anyway, that gave me my start, and then when I got into the Army, and my father gave me that start by telling me to come home and get married. You can't turn him down. I mean, I thought I was being very logical, telling him I will not get married until I get my commission or until I'm... but once he said, come on, I went. And it was... and of course, now my best friend went to Wisconsin. Oh, I went to Marquette. But we still kept our relationship, vacations and letters, things like that. And I see you're looking to see who my friends are. I guess I pretty well, as a young adult, he was it again. I had fraternity brother friends, but they were, just school friends. And Lauren and I went out in Marquette at various things while he was at Wisconsin. So obviously we had other friends then, but they were just acquaintances socially. And Fritz and I never fought over anything. Can't remember anything we ever fought over. Never had a disagreement of any kind. And one time, I remember this specifically because it was so, we were both walking down the street eating an ice cream cone. And for some ungodly reason, I just looked over and I shoved it in his nose, right? And he stopped at me, got all up, and I just stand there waiting to see what he can do. And he said, I can understand that. And so I remember him saying, I can understand that. And we both laughed. I said, I just had to do it. It was such an impulse, And he said, But he was Presbyterian, and since we were sort of inseparable, I went with him everywhere, and I would go to his choir practice with him on whatever nights they have them. And I did that for so long that at one point I was the only one who could sing the solo for an Easter Sunday song, an Easter Sunday sermon, session. And they asked me if I wouldn't please, because nobody else could sing this section. I said, I can't do that. So ask your priest. I'm sure you can, So I asked the priest next time I saw one. And he said, well, I don't think it can hurt you any, but he said, all I can say is, don't partake of the services. You can sing with them all you want. But he said, why don't you sing with our choir? I said, because I don't like Latin, and I don't like chants, and they don't have the same feeling. So for the next year, I sang with him, and then I went to his church every day, every Sunday. I'd go to mine, go Mass early in the morning, take an early Mass, and I'd get to his church at 10 or whatever they had, So I went to church twice every morning, every Sunday, that is. And it was a funny situation, but I don't think it hurt me any. I heard more sermons than I needed to, I'm sure. And at that time, I think the only things that I can say were big were the rise of the Nazis. And I remember specifically just complaining and being just outraged that they allowed the Nazis to just walk into Poland and take them over, and Czechoslovakia. And I'm saying, why didn't they do something? You can't let people do that, This was early, and of course everybody is into appeasement. That's what I'm having today with any time we're arguing what's going on with our kids and so forth. I said, you find everybody waits, don't get it, no, we're not, it's not our war, blah, 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 blah. And I said, and then all of a sudden it's a big now it's out of hand, out of control. Now you take great sacrifice to end it, to get, so at the moment, I have no great fondness for George Bush, but I have had little respect for any president recent years. Jimmy Carter, for example, I'm primarily Republican, but I vote in my mind, I don't go Democrat or Republican at all, but I lean more towards Republican. But Jimmy Carter has proven to me one of the notable people in the history. May not have been as a president, but he didn't have the cooperation they did. He didn't have the attitude that was necessary. And I have gained the opinion that anybody, and of course there's exceptions, but anybody going into politics is going into for one reason. They're going to make themselves a life income. All they got to do is stay in there make it to one level and keep, and now you're set for life. And I don't think they go in there for altruistic reasons. There are a few that I highly respect. One of them was, who was honest about it, was Dan Evans. And I knew Dan in junior Chamber of Commerce, and we worked together on a number of things. And I introduced him at the first breakfast meeting that he had when he was campaigning, a women's group, and so I've known him for a long time. And then when he finally left the Senate, he said he could not stand all the inside, the graft, say, I'll give you this, you give me that behind this or that. Everything is bargaining. Everything is a bargain. It can't be on your honest field. You can't stand up for this or that. You'll be out unless you join the group or, and I have little respect for politics. So I don't know how I got on that, but I'd say anyway, I'm having that problem with the kids. And no, listen, I'm not championing him or in any way, but I'm saying that you don't know. No, we're getting off of me. Forget that.
I think that'll probably be a good place to stop for today.
Yeah.
And then we can go and start talking about your kids next week.